important parts, even though my name's cut off here on the left. So I'm Rebecca Taylor and a registered nutritionist, and I'm based in the UK in Cambridge. I've seen many of you before, so it's a delight to be back to now talk about a really hot topic and one of a lot of controversy as well. So today we are on the topic of weight loss injections, and my question that I'm going to be discussing really is whether it's the new era of obesity treatment or not, and the pros, the cons, the uses of it, who is it for, who's it not for, the ethical concerns, cultural concerns, all of these things. So we're going to dive straight in because I have so much to go through. So you have probably seen many an article or social media post regarding Ozempic, which is the main one we've heard about. That's the one that's really it's been the main name that we've heard, even though there are other weight loss injections, and I'll talk through those different ones as well. But yeah, we mostly hear the name Ozempic, and there's been obviously this huge surge really over the last year. I would say probably beginning of last year was when it started. And yeah, all this social media buzz as well around these weight loss injections. So Ozempic and Wegovy are probably the top two that you might have heard of. And really everyone kind of knows, everyone's heard of Ozempic now, and even though we hadn't a year ago or just about over a year ago. So why is this? The drug's actually been around for several years now, nearly a decade, and it was originally used for type 2 diabetes treatment. So it's quite interesting that even though we had this product, and it's only now coming to the surface of being so popular and widespread, so that it is now literally a household name. So let's start with the big picture here and what the situation is globally with obesity. This will be no news to you that obesity is a huge problem worldwide. There's now, according to the World Health Organization, over 1 billion adults who are overweight, and 650 million of those who are obese. So concerningly, 40% of adults in most of the regions around the world are between 40% of those people who are overweight or obese are between the ages of 18 and 24. And that is continuing to grow. You can see the heat map here of what's to come in the next decade. And you can see in the darkest purple color that over 55% of some regions will be of the population will be overweight. Will actually be obese. So that is a BMI of over 30. So obviously with being overweight, it's not just about appearance, although that is a lot of people's concerns, and we will talk about that and the role of Ozempic regarding aesthetics. But we know that excess weight is really tied to a multitude of issues like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, even mental health issues, just to name literally a few problems. And also, importantly, the obesity rates are predicted to rise most rapidly in low and middle income countries too, not just the West, which is quite a new phenomenon. So what are weight loss injections? Let's start with the very basics. Like I said earlier, these medications were originally designed for type 2 diabetes to help people regulate their blood sugar and their appetite. So you might have heard of them being called GLP-1 agonists, and semaglutide, that is the active active component in Ozempic and Wegovy. And that GLP-1, the agonist just means it acts like the hormone. GLP-1 is this hormone that suppresses appetite. And I'll go on to a bit more actually how that works in the next slide. But how it works is it's obviously an injection, as you can see in the photo, subcutaneous. That means it's injected into maybe your stomach area where there's a bit of fat. And It's just done weekly, and the dose starts quite low and it gradually increases so that your body adapts gradually to it. So the most common one is semaglutide, and that is the GLP-1 agonist, and Ozempic leading the way there, and Wegovy. And then you have these other two, which are a bit less common, but they are still used. And Mounjaro, or the third point here, I don't actually quite know how you say it, tirzepatide, I'm going to say. That's a GLP-1 and GIP agonist. So that does both the action of basically reducing your blood sugar and reducing your appetite. So there is quite a lot of excitement about this new one, Mounjaro, because it's targeting two different drivers of obesity with the blood sugar regulation and appetite. We'll talk about more about this shortly. This is just a graphic that I'm a very visual person, so I find it very helpful to see, actually kind of visualize what would be happening biologically or biochemistry in a kind of cellular level, actually what's happening here with this semaglutide. So imagine that red part is Ozempic, and that's activating this receptor called GLP-1, and it's activated in your digestive system, and the signal is sent up to your brain to reduce your cravings and appetite, which is obviously a very attractive proposition for a lot of people, because we do know some people, they do actually have stronger cravings than other people because they actually produce less GLP-1. So whereas maybe 50 years ago, people would treat obesity as a simple calories in, calories out solution, you're just eating too much, it's not actually as simple as that, and that is becoming clear through the science, and knowing that some people, for example, one mechanism is that they don't produce enough GLP-1, and they quite literally have much stronger cravings for sugary and carbohydrate heavy foods. So that is where really this drug is obviously very exciting. In some ways, this drug is a real game changer and quite revolutionary, because no other drug has done this ever since before this. So we do have some clinical data as well. That the main one here is probably the STEP 1 trial, and this data really is probably the most referenced and well known in terms of Ozempic and the long-term impacts of it. So it was a really longitudinal study as well. It was 68 weeks long, which is great. So obviously, talking nearly, probably about a year and maybe not quite a year and a half. But there were also nearly 2,000 adults involved in this, so quite big sample size. And the adults in this study either had obesity or they were overweight, but they didn't have diabetes. And they were they were on semaglutide. So basically they're just brand names. Ozempic and Wegovy is the same thing, really. And we know from this study, we could see that they lost an average 15% of their total body weight, so 23 pounds of fat on average. But, and it's a big but, we also saw in the study there was a 15-pound a reduction of lean muscle mass of 15 pounds. So losing lean muscle mass is really not an ideal situation, because especially the muscle, it's metabolically active, and it supports our long-term health and long-term weight loss results as well. So if people are losing muscle, and also there is some concern about bone loss as well, long term, what's going to happen is it definitely a concern that they're going to be able to put that muscle back on, or is that going to cause problems, say, decades down the line? Are we going to have lots of people who are really frail? And if you have low bone mass and low muscle mass, that's a really not a good indicator for longevity and health. And also in terms of putting the weight back on, because we know that if you have more muscle, you burn more calories just at rest. So if people are losing muscle, then naturally their BMR level is going to be it's going to be lower as well. So obviously this study really highlights the need to monitor body composition, not just weight. And the good thing is that they did measure muscle loss as well as fat loss. A lot of studies don't do that. They just look at weight loss in total, which isn't really, it doesn't give us a very clear picture. But the key is that people who are taking Ozempic or any of these weight loss injections, they really must be doing resistance training and ensuring that they're having a high protein intake at the same time. Slight problem is that because these drugs reduce your appetite, is that a lot of people don't crave protein because protein is something that is very satiating, or they might only have a small amount of it, and then they might feel quite nauseous because that is one of the side effects. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment of the drug, that they don't want to basically have probably much or high protein diets. Really, it's probably not, a lot of people are not going to be craving big amounts of protein in their meals. So that is one of my issues with these drugs. And there's just another trial here which was done on Mounjaro, the one that I spoke about, which actually has the dual effect of reducing blood sugar and reducing appetite. And it's a bit more, it's a bit newer on the scene. And so it has this dual kind of mechanism, and it empowers particularly people with that insulin response. So really great for those with pre-diabetes as well. I think in terms of, as opposed to the other drugs, this one would be probably my preference. However, there's not quite as much clinical data on it yet, and we don't know, again, like how much so unlike the other study, we don't know how much muscle people are losing from it. So I mean, it's probably a similar effect, but on this study we just know that they did have quite a dramatic weight loss, so up to 24 kilograms. It's a lot. I mean, there were probably some very overweight people who were on this to lose that amount of weight. But yeah, participants on average, I think they lost 20, oh yeah, we've got it here, 20.9% of their body weight over 72 weeks. That is a very big figure. So say if someone's 250 pounds, that would be over 50 pounds of weight loss. Is there anything else to mention on this slide? I mean, the same thing goes for this, though, that resistance training and high protein diets are really key for the long-term effectiveness of these, because if you're not taking them, you're not going to be getting the effect. It's not like, I think some people think, oh, I could take these drugs as a kickstart to my weight loss, but it doesn't really work like that, because a bit like if you imagine that you're on statins and you've got high cholesterol, you have to keep taking those statins to get the same, for them to work. And it's similar to this with this drug, and the GLP-1 impact won't last as long as you're not on them. And in terms of who can actually have them globally, where are they accessible? It depends worldwide. Most countries approve these injections for people with a BMI over 30 or over BMI of 27 with one weight-related condition, for example, diabetes. So in the US and Australia, private insurance might cover it, but in Europe, you need a formal diagnosis, or you need a formal diagnosis and a referral to get hold of Ozempic. And then in other areas, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, there's some supply issues here, and yeah, it's also limited access, possibly due to higher costs for these areas. So yeah, less less abundant in those regions, but I was thinking if there's anything else on the access side of things. I think that an issue is that in some areas of the West that there's priority given to some people if they're privatized, that actually people who are looking at for aesthetic reasons, that they might be the ones who get the access to the drugs first, and those who you could say potentially might need it more with type 2 diabetes, they might not be able to get hold of it. Especially there's been quite a lot of shortage recently because of such an uptake, from social media and people doing it for aesthetic reasons. But I don't know, maybe it will level out once the craze has settled down a little bit more. Oh, and yeah, Ozempic is obviously very expensive. So we're here at the bottom that it carries a price tag of approximately $1,000 a month. That is huge and hugely unaffordable for the majority of people. So that raises some concerns too, which we'll talk about in a bit. However, people who do hail how great these weight loss injections are also like to talk about the benefits outside of weight loss. So to give a balanced view here, I will talk about some of the other benefits that Ozempic can offer aside from just weight loss. Obviously, we know that when you lose weight, often you have an improvement of other markers as well, like cholesterol and blood pressure, just to name a few, or inflammation markers, for example. And that is likely just because of the natural response of weight loss. Might not be, I don't think, anything magical in these injections necessarily, but more just because people are losing weight, that they have these additional added benefits of improved heart health. And for this one, there was a trial, the SELECT trial. We can see that the semaglutide, that active ingredient in Ozempic, they showed that it reduced the risk of cardiovascular incidents by 20% in people with obesity and prior heart disease. That's quite good. I'm not sure over what timescale they did that, but they also found that there was lower systolic blood pressure. So that will contribute to the lower cardiovascular risk as well. And then, yeah, improved lipid profile, so lowered bad cholesterol and lowered triglycerides. So yeah, I mean, this is good. Obviously we do, cardiovascular disease is #1 killer really. So it is promising to see that we do have hopefully some a way that people can truly get some actual long-term help with their risk of these chronic diseases, and then we know that a lot of them people obesity is something that feels like out of their control. And yeah, so it's quite a nuanced discussion, this. I think you'll agree that we can't say they're great for necessarily like the perfect thing for everyone, but yeah. Anyway, without going too much on a tangent, let's talk about the side effects of them. And the #1 side effects that is reported from people is nausea. On average, I think it's about 40% of people report that they feel nauseous. And that is particularly at the beginning of taking these injections, because the body is getting used to this GLP-1 that's suddenly being increased. And GLP-1 can cause gastro issues because it slows down digestion, and it slows down yeah, it slows down the gastric emptying of the stomach, so food stays longer in the stomach. And if you've ever had a lot of food, you might, really big meal, you probably felt a bit nauseous sometimes. So it's similar to that. And sometimes it can cause vomiting as well. But yeah, that kind of uncomfortable feeling of fullness is quite a common complaint, which isn't very pleasant. And also other gastro issues like diarrhea and constipation can be quite common too. Less common but more serious, pancreatitis and gallbladder issues. So some people shouldn't take Ozempic. I believe it's those with thyroid, some chronic thyroid disease. If I can remember correctly, I'm forgetting the name of this, but yeah, that's why it's so important to go to a doctor basically, rather than self-prescribing on the internet, because they'll be able to screen you properly. So we know 1 in 5 people discontinue with taking these injections because of the side effects being more than they can bear. So yeah, what I put at the below, this GLP-1, obviously the benefit of it is that it slows the stomach emptying, and that's why you feel less hungry. But then it does affect the brain appetite centers, and there is some worry that it might reduce overall your enjoyment of other things as well. So even personally, I get a lot of enjoyment from food, so this wouldn't appeal to me that you would kind of lose that enjoyment of maybe some of those more satiating foods. But yeah, other enjoyable foods that you might like that aren't necessarily going to affect weight loss, like coffee, for example, that actually might be something you enjoy less if you're on these drugs. So we know from this study, and from just from research we know about weight regain and how that works, is that we observed like significant weight regain post having these injections. So this research was published in Diabetes, Obesity and Metabolism, and it followed people after they'd been taking these injections, and it found that most of them regained a really substantial proportion of the weight that they initially lost. So yeah, like I said, people can't be expecting to go on these for like a couple of weeks or a couple of months and for it to have a long-term impact. It's kind of, people have to really sign up for the process of taking these for the long term. And obviously we know that it's not going to cure obesity, but only going to help manage it whilst you're taking the drugs. And the body's kind of physiology and appetite signals, they kind of return back to how they were pre-treatment, leading obviously to that weight regain, maybe even sometimes more, especially if you've lost a lot of muscle. Yeah, like I said earlier, you might actually end up unfortunately putting on more fat and not regaining the muscle, which is not a good situation. And definitely, especially if you've spent a lot of money on this, or you've been feeling quite nauseous and not great, it's not, yeah, these are real concerns to be worried about. So that's why long-term management strategies of taking Ozempic or any of these must include helping the person to build sustainable lifestyle changes. So healthy eating patterns, physical activity, particularly weight resistance training, and behavior modification, maybe working on more of the kind of psychological aspects as well alongside doing this. So unfortunately, yeah, it's not a permanent fix. It's more like a medical tool that we can use. So I don't know if any of you are on social media and have seen the Ozempic hashtag going around, but it's reached over 1 billion views on TikTok, and that was last year, that wasn't even this year. So some people do see these drugs as kind of these medical breakthroughs, whereas there's the other side where people worry about it promoting dependency or reinforcing weight stigma, and kind of supporting kind of normalizing disordered eating behaviors. So that could be in part because of it's been a large proportion of celebrities that have been kind of endorsing it really and using it, and obviously they have the funds to do so, but yeah, I personally I have an issue with it because they have such a huge following, and yeah, I think if you have a big platform that you should be quite responsible with these sort of things. But yeah, celebrities have openly admitted to using it, and yeah, it's now become quite normalized. There's no stigma around it really, as far as I can see, people are almost like proud to say that they use the drugs. So it's interesting because I'm not sure that would have been the case even maybe 5-10 years ago. People wouldn't want to admit to these kind of things, but it's yeah, obviously the access of it is really inequitable, where most people can't, it's just completely out of their budget really to do so unless they're able to get hold of it from their healthcare provider or private insurance. But that's not always a straightforward, and some people might not be able to even have private healthcare. So I live in the UK, so we have the NHS, and they do prescribe it to some people, but I think there's been some issues with shortages as well, and supply issues. So obviously, yeah, it raises questions of fairness and health equality. And then I suppose really with the focus on, with the surge of all these posts on social media, it kind of adds that pressure of appearance being so important and not being health driven. And Ozempic face is something that's been talked about quite a lot, where it's kind of, you're losing a lot of fat from your face quite quickly because of the rapid weight loss. And then obviously it's quite some people, sort of saying it's quite obvious if people have taken Ozempic because they can see that visual facial aging. So are we kind of addressing that root cause of weight loss, or are we just masking it? And what happens even when the supply chain prioritizes cosmetic users over diabetics? These are some important questions I think to ask. So quite interestingly, some people might have access to these jabs to return to work if weight loss or their weight is holding them back from working. And I think that's interesting. And I think that could be great for some people. And these are just a few articles which I came across. There is a small amount of deaths that have been linked to taking these drugs. It's not many, but yeah, the side effects, obviously, like I said, there's some more serious side effects like pancreatitis, but they are quite rare. But it's definitely something we need to consider and think about. And then there's the online pharmacies, which is making access very easy for people to get hold of these. And they're making a lot of money doing so. So the problem is that they might give you too large a dosage, or they might not know your full medical history, or just we don't know exactly what might be in them. It's not like there's any regulations around this at the moment. So that's yeah, I'm hearing quite a lot about people accessing these jabs if they can't get them through the NHS in the UK, that they'll go online and answer a few questions, and that's all they do, and then suddenly you can have these posted through your door within a few days. And it's quite, these are medical injections really at the end of the day, so they are yeah, quite serious really. It's not just yeah, I'm hoping there'll be regulations around this soon. So obviously we can see from the studies that these medications can definitely be effective, but they're still, I don't think they're still the magic bullet that everyone's looking for. Even though it might sound like they are, I don't believe that they are. And as usual, it's the kind of boring advice that no one wants to hear, that they work best when they're combined with real whole foods, resistance training, good sleep, stress management. They're more like maybe a catalyst for those changes. Potentially people could see that it could help them, even though the effects of them won't last, obviously, when you stop taking them. But maybe for some people that might be enough motivation to keep going if they start seeing weight loss, and it can be kind of a catalyst for change, but definitely not a cure. And lifestyle will always be the foundation for long-term well-being. That's unfortunately not going to change, unless maybe they, I don't know, who knows what science can do, but I don't think there'll ever be an occasion where we can just take an injection and that will be that. So my recommendation, if I see a client who's on weight loss injections, strength training is a non-negotiable 2 to 3 times a week. Protein intake should be around 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. And they must focus on good quality sleep, stress reduction, and whole nutrient-dense foods. Simple advice that I would give pretty much to everyone who wants to improve their health and well-being, but particularly important.
So you're saying about 50, 60, 80 grams of protein per day per person?
Yes, at
Wow.
least.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot?
Yeah, because usually I think about 25 to 30 is normal.
Oh, really?
What do you think is normal?
Well, I would think of that as enough for a meal, not for a whole day. 30
Oh,
grams of protein per meal is what I would say. So the calculation here is you think of you have your ideal body weight, and you create that amount of protein based on it. So for someone who is wanting to lose a lot of weight, I would up that to at least 1.6 grams. Yeah, maybe even you could even go up to 2 grams of protein per kilogram.
so a normal woman who maybe weighs, let's say 55 kilograms would take like 90 grams of protein per day.
Yeah,
Or is that per meal?
no, that would be per day, don't
Per
worry.
day. Okay. Wow.
Yes, it can be a bit tricky to reach that amount. I'm a vegetarian, so that can be quite challenging. So I do have protein powder to help supplement that. And it can be expensive as well, because protein is generally the most expensive type of food. But unless you're going for your beans and pulses, they're very cheap. But or protein powder, I think you can make your own protein powder actually if you blend up some grains and pulses, so, or nuts and seeds. So yeah, this study here where I've referenced, it's shown that 39% of weight loss was lean mass if they didn't do any resistance training. It's a lot. So that's probably number one issue, I think. So sarcopenia is a term that's it describes when you lose muscle mass as you lose weight, and particularly as you get older. So that's something that's a big problem for particularly people who are maybe 60 plus, but it's now going to be an issue for people who aren't resistance training and taking these drugs at the same time. Okay, so GLP-1, which I'm going on about a lot, is this hormone in the brain. You can actually activate this hormone through foods, which I think is quite cool and exciting to know about. So no food or nutrient can actually perfectly replicate kind of what Ozempic does, but certain foods can act in a similar way to support those pathways of appetite regulation and blood sugar control. So these would be my favorite foods to include. Soluble fiber, probably number one, really, for appetite control and blood sugar control, actually, both really, because this helps to slow down gastric emptying, the stomach, food emptying out of the stomach, and increases your fullness. So if you're looking at weight loss foods, this is probably your best thing to focus on. Oats, chia seeds, legumes, soluble meaning that it dissolves in water. So
Rebecca Taylor, would you include psyllium in that?
yes, that's is that an insoluble fiber? I think
But it does slow down digestion.
it does. Yes, it's great for perfect poops.
Yeah.
If you have diarrhea or constipation, psyllium husk is the best. Yes. So that's a really good one. And then obviously I have to talk about protein because that also works like a GLP-1 agonist in a way. It's in the way that it reduces your satiety and cravings.
So what you're showing us now is a list of foods that you could do instead of taking an injection.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this would be the kind of nutrition option. So obviously it's not going to act in such a drastic way, I suppose, as the injections. Or you could look to support yourself with these foods alongside. I mean, these are going to be good foods for anyone to eat, but yeah, particularly we know that these, they have that similar impact really. So where was I? Healthy fat. They support your blood sugar stability and they stabilize your blood sugar and help improve your lipid profiles like Ozempic does. Fermented foods, because we know that a healthy gut microbiome plays a role in metabolism and those appetite signals as well. And magnesium-rich foods, which a lot of us are deficient in magnesium, are great to include because they help to improve insulin sensitivity and then helps the body to manage blood sugar levels more effectively because of that insulin sensitivity. Then polyphenol-rich foods, which basically means anything that's like berries or a plant, particularly the darker, the better. They provide antioxidants and they might help metabolism a little bit. The green tea is said to help with or boost our metabolism. Not really like the word boost, but they help support our metabolism. So can be a good weight loss aid. And just because this is a big topic and it's hard to really talk about everything around these injections. I mean, there's so much that you can learn about. And if you do want to learn more, I would say these are the sources I would go to because they're really trusted. Whereas social media might influence us one way or another, and kind of we might be quite swayed by the headlines and influencers who are talking about this, and the real story is in the science here. So whether kind of you're interested professionally, academically, or personally, I'd really recommend you deep dive into some studies and these sources. So because there probably is someone in your life, if it's not yourself, might be a family member that's interested in maybe taking these, and it'd be great if you could help give them a nice balanced view on it and be educated, which hopefully, I've been able to give you a bit of a balanced view here of the pros and cons. I mean, to sum up, really, we have to admit that these weight loss injections, they are kind of a major breakthrough in medical obesity treatment. There's no two ways about that it has caused a lot of excitement, and for good reason. I think, in a lot of ways, they are going to offer, and they have been offering already, significant benefits for a lot of people, and might even, help reduce the incidences of major diseases like cancer and cardiovascular disease, which are a huge burden as well on our healthcare systems. Actually, it's not just obesity, but it's all these other comorbidities alongside obesity that is going to actually reduce as well. So I think that's, we have to give merit where merit's due. However, as I've said before, they're not a magic bullet, and nothing, I don't think, ever will be. And there's really important caveats to keep in mind, as well as the high costs, unequal access worldwide, and these side effects, and then social and cultural impacts as well of the celebrity use of them, and potentially damaging people's relationship with food, or enjoyment of food, social expectations, that kind of narrative of, if you're thin, you're attractive, and that being the kind of desirable, or most desirable attribute. That some people, they think that if they're thin, that means they're healthy and they're going to be happy, which of course isn't always the case, because someone can look healthy and on the outside and be socially have a socially kind of acceptable body type, but internally, we don't know what's going on. They could be it could have really high cholesterol levels or something. So yeah, it could be, I think, pushing the narrative of how you look is the most important thing, and aesthetics is the most important thing, and taking the focus away from longevity and health. So yeah, I guess my goal today was to try and provide you with a somewhat well-rounded and evidence-based view, so you can critically, in your minds, understand the promise and the kind of limitations of these medications. And I'm wondering, really, what's this bringing up for you? What stood out to you? And are there any topics you'd want to talk about more in this? I have a bit of time, so we can discuss any more of these areas a little bit more. And yeah, I'd just love to hear your thoughts and reflections, really.
Well, let's go ahead and get into the questions here. We have a question from Christian in chat about the link between weight and diabetes. Does heavy weight normally contribute to diabetes?
Yes. So if you carry more fat, that is linked to having more triglycerides in the blood, and reduced insulin response as well. So reduced insulin sensitivity. So yeah, there's definitely that link between the two, because a fat is actually quite metabolically active as well, and that can impact your blood sugar signaling and insulin release. So yeah, there's definitely the more weight you carry, or the more body fat, I should say, you carry, the higher your risk of diabetes, yes, because of that blood sugar fluctuation.
Okay, we'll go to Ismail. First question with the hand raised.
Hello.
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 Yeah. Good morning, Miss Rebecca. Good morning, Dr. Lambert. Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. God bless you.
Thank
Yeah, my
you.
question is this. What role do physicians and dietitians play in supervising injectable weight loss treatment? Can I take it again?
Oh, just the so what role do physicians and dietitians have in
Yes.
helping to manage?
In supervising injectable weight loss treatment.
Yes, thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
what they should be doing is pre-screening you for any family history of there are some conditions or family history where it wouldn't be appropriate for you to take Ozempic, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of that, or the few conditions that would be. So they should be screening you, and they should be making sure that you're aware that this is like long-term, it's not a short, quick fix solution. And then I don't know in the UK if we have dietitians supporting people whilst they're taking Ozempic. I don't think they do at the moment. And they should be, because like I was saying, it's so important to make sure people are having the weight loss injections alongside those sustainable weight loss changes. So yeah, I'm not sure, it probably varies country to country, but I hope that will be more of a norm as time goes on and they realize how important it is to have that extra support.